Before I start any of the pruning, I always like to use isopropyl alcohol to clean off the cutting surfaces of the shears, my pruning saw, and my electronic shears. And after that, I'll just wipe them down good with a piece of paper towel. And I do this anytime I'm moving from one vine or one tree to another, or whenever I'm starting out. These ones are a little more difficult because they kind of shred everything. So I try and just kind of wipe and pull away from them a little bit without cutting myself because they're very sharp. I'm going to be pruning the rest of my Hardy Kiwi today, and I'm going to concentrate on removing some of the long growth, especially when it winds around other growth, and anything growing under and inside the main area here. Anything under here, it won't get enough sunlight, so I'm going to cut a lot of that out. And then most of it is going to be shortening long branches to, about anywhere from 6 inches to 12 inches. These long ones are ones that I want to mostly remove. This one I actually pruned in the late fall, so there's not going to be that much to do with it. But I'm still going to sort of finish it up before it starts to wake up. They tend to wind themselves around each other in sort of a corkscrew form, and especially those, you don't want to leave those on. I'm going to be saving a lot of these to use as cuttings to make more. And then I'm going to remove anything in here that looks dead or shriveled. This one's actually starting to sprout already. So I'm a little later than I'd like to be on pruning it, but they'll get it done now. This one I'm going to leave because we'll get some fruit on the end there. Okay, I think this one's done. Because of where it is, one of the other things I concentrate on is making sure nothing goes more than a couple inches below this thing here, because it's where I walk through all the time. And stuff will grow down there throughout the season, but I will just clip it off as it comes along. Or, I'll do 3 or 4 prunings a year of this one. It only takes a couple minutes each time. I didn't mention before, but this vine here is Anna, and it's a female Hardy Kiwi. It can tolerate very low temperatures. It produces a ton of fruit, and it needs a male pollinator somewhere in the area. I have a couple male vines that are, 50, 100 feet away. I also last year added on a graft that I'll show you a picture of in a minute, of this, of one of the male vines to this female kiwi vine. And hopefully that blooms this year and produces flowers. Sort of make sure there's some pollination over here. This next kiwi vine I'm going to be pruning here is another hardy kiwi. It's another Anna. It's actually the first one I planted here. It's somewhere between 17 and 18 years old. And it's a good lesson in why not to buy something like a hardy kiwi or a fig or something like that from like a Lowe's or a Home Depot or any of those big box stores, or some of the larger nurseries. Most of them sell stuff that's reproduced by tissue culture. And this one here, even though it's 17 or 18 years old, it didn't start producing fruit until year 13. And tissue culture plants can take a lot longer to produce fruit. They can take anywhere from, I would say, 8 to 15 years to produce your first fruit. Whereas the other vine that I pruned just a few minutes ago is the same exact variety. It's grown from this same plant. I took a cutting of it and grew that from this plant right here, and that one produced fruit at around 4 years. So that's the range I've had, 3 to 5 if I produce them by cutting. If they're from store tissue culture, 8 plus, 8 to 15 years. So I would recommend going with something that's done from cutting, whether you buy the cuttings yourself or get the cuttings from somebody, or whether you buy the plant from somebody that grew them from cutting. Specifically with hardy kiwi. Also with fig. Fig is pretty similar in that way. And I just pruned the other one, so I'm going to spray these down with a little alcohol first. And then wipe it off with a paper towel. And I do that between any plants that I prune or moving from one tree to another, even if it's the same variety. So the pruning of this one is going to be pretty similar to the last one I just did. And I'm going to start by removing anything that looks dried out, or with hardy kiwi, they specifically, the branches start to look shriveled when they're dead. So I'll cut them off. This one here is like mostly broken off. They'll snap really easily and you'll see brown on the inside. So anything with brown, anything that's shriveled, remove that first. And then I'll move on to shortening some of these long growths here, especially the ones that kind of shoot up from the middle and hang out. Some of them can be 6, 7 feet long, and I'll cut them all back. And anything that's wound around itself, I'll cut out this sort of part that's wrapping around. And anything that's really inside here that looks like it won't get any light. Sometimes those branches die off on their own, but sometimes you have to prune them away. And I'll also concentrate, I have another kiwi vine right over here, on making sure I can separate them out. Because this one here is one of my female vines, and that's one of my male vines, and that's another female vine there. So I'm gonna get started here. This is what they tend to do throughout the season and wrap around everything. And you can just cut off as much of that as you can. Trying to shorten it to maybe 6 to 10 inches, 6 to 12 inches for each one. Ideally, I would prune this a little bit earlier because I'm starting to see the little nubs poke through that it's starting to grow again. I'm going to save a lot of these for cuttings for later. Sometimes I'm trying to trace back where the long strand started and cut that off. If you don't unwind some of these from here and remove them, they tend to choke off the plant eventually. or the part of it. It's not a huge deal, but. And hardy kiwis will get messy throughout the year if you don't come by every once in a while and remove some of the really long growth. You try to remove as much of the crossing wood as possible, because when the wind blows it back and forth, it's just going to rub and create damage. Okay, that's most of what I'm going to remove before spring. It can get pretty wiry and tangled up if you don't do this regularly. So I would say if you have a kiwi vine, just plan on pruning it at least 3 times a year. You can do it real quickly. It doesn't have to be real specific. You can just cut half or somewhere between half to 70% off the vine twice a year, and that'll be it. And what that does is it also gets the lower part of the vine to be stronger, and it gets it to produce fruit. If you don't prune it and you just let it grow on top of itself, it really won't produce anything, and it'll sort of choke the vine off a bit. So a lot of times people with old non-productive vines just aren't pruning them at all. And you can make them look nicer when you prune them too. This is the last one of the Anna Hardy Kiwi I'm going to be pruning for today. And I'm going to do just like I did with the other one. I'm going to try to thin out the middle section there so things aren't overlapping so much, so that sunlight can get to them. This one I think is about 6 or 7 years old. It's not one of my oldest ones, but it grows very vigorously because it gets a little more sun than some of the other ones. And I train all of them to 1 or 2 main trunks coming out of the ground. One's probably better, but sometimes two gives it a chance to go in multiple directions. And then you just want to remove anything that you don't want. So in this case, a lot of this is starting to weigh down and drag onto the floor. I may cut a chunk of that out. I've held it up with a stake last year, but long term that's not great. And I want to be able to get under this with a lawnmower a little bit easier. But there's a ton of growth on this one. This one I didn't prune in the late fall, so this one needs a lot more removed than the last two that I just did. But I'm going to be doing the same thing, trimming a lot of the long shoots down to, like for instance this one, down to maybe 8 inches or so, somewhere in that range. And some of these ones that are crossing with just long growth, I'll cut this windy one back all the way to here. And I'll remove some of this longer stuff at the end here and unwind the vines on it. And I'm just going to go around the whole vine and do that. And then remove sections that are in my way. This whole branch might be in my way. It's coming all the way out into where, like the middle of the yard here. So I'll probably, as much as I hate to lose all of this fruit that would come on the end of here, I'm going to cut it right to here this year. And you can be kind of aggressive with Hardy Kiwi like that. So I'm going to remove this whole bottom section here so I don't have to stake it up anymore. I'm going to lose a lot of spots that probably would have fruited this year, but there's so much growth in here that that's okay, and I can just leave some more on in different areas. One of the reasons these are my favorite plant to prune is because no matter how tangled or long they get, they don't have any feet on them. So ivy have these little feet that stick to everything, and they damage everything you're pulling them off of. But Hardy Kiwi are just very smooth, so any one you cut off you could kind of unravel or just get it out of there without damaging any of the other plants around it or any of the other parts of the vine. A lot of this growth is sort of shooting into my garden now, so I'm trying to remove most of it that's growing into the garden. Okay, so I think I'm done with this one for now. Not as much crossing, not as much on the inside, a lot of shorter, and not as much stretching out into the garden. I'll still cut it back a couple times this year too, because it grows like crazy. This is a follow-up on the 3 vines that I pruned in March. It's been almost exactly 2 months, and you can see they definitely grow like crazy. Some of these have grown, 30, 40 inches in length, and they're covered in flowers right now that are in bloom. I'll do a close-up of the flowers in a second. So don't be worried about pruning them too hard. They grow back very fast and they grow like crazy. These are some of the flowers on the first of the 3 Anna vines I pruned. This is a close-up of what the flowers look like, with the little part in the middle that looks like it's developing into a fruit. That distinguishes the female vine, which this is, from a male vine, which doesn't have that. This is the second vine I pruned, the oldest of the 3. This is the one that's 18 years old, and it's also covered in fruit right now. Here's a closer look at the 18-year-old vine. The trunk on this vine is very thick. Here's some of the blooms that are all over it. Here's a couple of blooms on one of the male vines I have. See, they are missing that little piece in the middle, so they just have the little black tendrils on the outside. And this one's needed to pollinate the Anna variety. This is the last of the 3 vines that I pruned. It's growing even more than the other 2. And this year, this one's covered in blooms too. So yeah, some of the tendrils are multiple feet long, and they go way up. And I can prune and remove some of those tendrils at any point in the year. I can cut them off at the base, or I can cut them off about 6 inches in. A lot of the flowers on these are formed on some of the branches that I pruned back to, 10 to 15 inches, somewhere in that range. And then they just formed big clusters of flowers on the end of them. Right now they're covered in flowers and being pollinated by the bees, and I'll do a follow-up in a little while when they start to form fruit, hopefully, and when the fruit develop.